advantage with local mental health centers and local fairly qualified health centers to recruit staff. Right now, we're at a distinct disadvantage. If we wanted to hire a social worker today, for instance, and they had student loans, and Wasatch Mental Health had an equal position and equal pay available, it would make a lot more sense for that person to take the job at Wasatch because they're qualified under the National Health Service Corps for reimbursement and we're not. So it's literally going to take an act of Congress, but the bill's been written. I've seen a draft of it, and we'll be working toward having that introduced sometime this year.
Fantastic. And that's obviously something I think we would love, I know myself would like to help with if necessary, especially given the shortage in that type of professionals in this field. It's something I think is crucial.
Yeah, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's crucial that we understand for the success of this program and other programs like it that have lost that. The last question I have is something I learned recently was that for every dollar we spend on prevention, we end up saving around $17 in treatment. What particular funding shifts could help provide for better outcomes for patients through your program that would actually be a cost savings to the taxpayers in the end?
Well, we've already put some pretty good dents in that. We have 22% of the state population here in Utah County and 27% of all the kids, but we provide 67% of all prevention services that are delivered in the state here in Utah County. And one of the best examples of that is the Eliminate Alcohol Sales to Youth program that Pat and I worked on back in 2006 and 2007. When it started, we were collecting arrest data for youth who were arrested for alcohol charges in the county. And at that time, we had about half the population that we do now. We had over 600 a year back then. This past year, we've had 200. So the population's doubled, but we've reduced the number of arrests by a factor of 3 over that period of time. So that's a significant number of kids who don't get into the treatment system. So there's things like that that we do that are really successful already. We're looking at where we have more significant problems and with the opiate issue right now in Utah County. And we've got a couple of particular spots where we need to do more in terms of community prevention coalitions. And that's particularly in Pleasant Grove and Spanish Fork. People may want to crucify me for saying that in a public meeting, but that's what we do, is target where the problem is. And so our plans this year are to create community coalitions in those 2 areas and get the public involved in helping solve their own problem by providing prevention services there.
Fantastic. I appreciate that and the work you guys do. I think those are critical elements that the public understands what we're doing and what's out there. And most importantly, the drug courts, the community prevention coalitions, and how those help to enhance our communities and make them better places.
Great.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So on that bill that you're running through Congress, Senator Hatch plays a pretty key role in the committees there. Is he on board with this?
I haven't spoken to his staff yet, but I can certainly do that and ask the question.
I think he still chairs the Health Committee, right? Doesn't he, on the?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's,
It's still
he'll have to go
kind of
through that
premature.
committee.
Let me send you all a copy of the bill so you can see what it says, and then we can talk about what the best approach would be to try to move it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
I will move that we approve and authorize consent agenda item 19.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to approve and authorize consent agenda item number 19. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
Before I leave, can I ask Commissioner Lee if you would sign the form? Pat and I are headed up to the state here in about 30 minutes, and if I can hand deliver this, they would be very happy.
Oh, you want to do it right now?
Do
This
you mind?
is oh, come on up.
A little ceremonial
Little
signing.
ceremonial sign here. We have to stand up, take pictures too? Easy enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just had a quick question on 2 before we do a finding or anything like that. My question, and maybe it's more probably for Brian Thompson. We give the Arts Board $2,500, and I can't remember contractually if that was also the in-kind donation, because part of this fee that we're waiving is $875 for the building rental. I thought that was already included in their contract. Did we not?
I don't recall.
Okay,
But it seemed like there was a commitment for it.
yeah,
Well, I think from the discussions I had, maybe my memory might be faulty on it, is that they have held some of their festivals or whatever they're calling it here, in different places and actually had to rent. And the question was, why don't you use some of our facilities here?
right.
And
But that's
that
what I
was-
mean, I thought we put that already in the contract that they also could use our space in-kind donation. That's why I'm wondering why we have to waive
Why do we
it.
have to waive it?
I thought
Oh,
we did that. That was my question.
Maybe it's just a procedural basis, just to keep it clean with everything
Yeah,
else.
cause
that we're doing.
that was my memory on how we did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do have the next few that we'll need to find findings and, if we decide to approve them with findings and then also
And
probably with the
reports.
stipulation that we have at the end always of having, a report
Request to have
back.
it come back, yeah.
A report back of how it did
Especially
benefit.
from our arts board. Yeah, that was the only question I had. So.
Okay. So any other questions on number two?
Okay, then I'll move that we approve the request to the Arts Board to waive the $875 building rental and the $300 event permit fee for the Children's Art Festival to be held at the the Health and Justice Building. I won't use the abbreviation, so sorry. On May 5th, 2017, with the findings that the public good is outweighed by the cost of the event fees.
And,
that.
And with the stipulation that we get a report back on the
I
event.
think you meant that the other way, the public good is outweighs the
Yes.
cost.
Sorry, whatever. Renee will fix it for me, she knows.
second,
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. On the motion, as stated, all in favor say aye.
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 That passes 3-0. Now to number three, if there's any questions.
Nope.
If not, we can move on to finding.
okay, I'll move that we approve a request from Run for Refugees to waive the $50 event permit fee for a race on the Murdoch Canal Trail on August 5th, 2017, with findings that the public good outweighs the permit fee and with an additional report back from the host of the event.
Second.
We got a motion and a second as stated for number three on the regular agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Number four.
Any questions?
None.
I'll move that we approve the request from Ability First Utah to waive the event fee in the amount of $250 for use of the North Boat Harbor Drive and Lower Provo River Parkway for the 15th Annual Ability First Run, Walk, and Roll to be held September 9th, 2017, with the findings that the public interest is outweighed by the event cost and with the stipulation that we get a report back on the success of the event.
Second?
I got a motion and a second, as stated on regular agenda item number 4. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, number 5, this was something that was agreed to last year in the way of a payment for the helping of the preservation of the Rock Canyon area with Provo City. And as we went through that process, in their agreement, there was some dates for them to turn in receipts of their purchases to us, which didn't happen, and that's the reason why we brought it before the commission again to do a waiver on that October 31st, 2016 deadline that was put in there, so that we can expend that check to them for what we agreed to do with the Rock Canyon areas. And was there some other questions on it or comments?
Dave, just a general question or comment. Do we have any type of protection mechanism or double check in this to try and prevent this from reoccurring in the future?
No, it's up to the applicant. So, the entity that receives funds. it's their
You're still not on, there you go.
It's the entity's obligation to provide that timely. We really don't follow up on their obligation there. Once we sign the agreement with them, they have that agreement in hand, that they should be aware of the obligations that they have, including the deadline to submit that reimbursement request.
Perfect. I'd make note, that part of my general support for this would be the fact that I believe it's important to fulfill our commitments and be a good working neighbor in keeping our commitments with entities that we've committed funds to. And hope Provo will recognize that in this action and reciprocate with some parking solutions.
Amen. Oh, wait, we had our prayer portion, right?
Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts with that? Okay, a motion would be in order.
I'll move that we approve the waiver as stated in number 5.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to approve the waiver as stated, number 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. Now we're not on to number 6. Robert, this one, I'll just state this right off. I have not seen a contract for this, and it gives me great pause because I want this to go forward, but I have not seen that contract or had an opportunity to review that contract. And just out of a default, I'd like to either consider continuing it a week or doing something so that,
I think continuing, it's too costly to the county, I think we need to have that, I mean, honestly, continuing is deadly on our timeline because we've already delayed this, so. But depends on the concerns.
yeah.
Would you like me to address?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, as you know, we went through a process to get here, a lengthy process. And as far as what's been worked out, as far as the legal review has been done on the workday provision, the workday contract, that has been done and completed. As to the determination between the implementers, Collaborative, and Mercer, I have been working with Mercer on some contract. I have a master services agreement, which I did review and sent them to them last week. I did get a review back yesterday. There are a couple of changes that I sent back to them yesterday afternoon, and I haven't heard back from them this morning. I did email them. The provisions are not catastrophic. They're just minor things, clarifications. They also, I made some modifications last week to their scope of work in order to protect the county against change orders, or I would say unilateral change orders. So that any time that there might be a change order, it has to require the consent of the county. And so that's,
Meaning HR director and commission.
which I think that's important for your protection, so you can be the driver in this situation. They consented to all those. And so the scope of work, which I did send it to you last night, I tried to upload it on the agenda system. It was not working yesterday when I tried to upload it. Myself and my assistant tried to do so on separate computers, and it didn't work. So you received that last night late, and I apologize for the lateness of it, but the scope of work does identify the fees, does identify the not to exceed amount, does identify what the project's gonna look like. The contract itself between us, potential contract between us and Mercer, is a master services agreement. The provisions that I'm talking about is there's an insurance provision. We have a certain amount that we've typically required of vendors. That amount is meant to cover us under the Government Immunity Act. As you know, in the Government Immunity Act, we have a certain amount that we can be potentially liable up to that amount. And so we typically require insurance to cover that full amount. Their response back yesterday was a little bit short of that amount. And so I responded back with, you need to come up to that full amount. The other provision that I sent back yesterday related to, just one second.
And their response to that was, that should be okay?
Yeah. When I talked to him on the phone, after I sent the email, I called on the phone, talked to him about it, and I got the impression that everything should be fine. He just had to run it across his folks. I talked to Carrie at Mercer, and my understanding everything was gonna be fine, that I should get some response back this morning. I just haven't seen it yet. The other concern that I had related to a potential security breach, data breach. I had proposed similar language that was included in our proposed workday agreement. which Workday has agreed to take on that liability as far as if it's their breach, that they will take care of it. The Mercer agreement, what they sent back to me is more of a notice. They'll provide us notice, but doesn't really define as to who's gonna take care of covering, let's say it's an employee or something like that, whose data is breached at their fault, then who's gonna cover accredited monitoring and all those kind of things necessary and things. So that part, I asked them to go back and modify in accordance with what I had suggested before. And then there was one other provision, which is very minor. I just, instead of having required approval, I put required written approval. So it's very clear that, and that's in paragraph 2 of the master service agreement. This morning, I did talk also to Carl Holland. As you may know, we have a policy in our office, in the county attorney's office, that if a contract's over $500,000, we have more than one attorney review it. And Carl made a couple other minor recommendations. I've emailed Carrie those, that they're not really, they're important. For example, one of them was if a grammar request is made for business information of Mercer, we want Mercer to come in and defend that. We already have a provision in there that allows for us to provide documents in accordance with grammar laws. But we want Mercer to come in and defend anything that would request their information, their business information or confidential information. And then the other one was that we talked about maybe excluding from liability, limits of liability related to any data breach, because that could be, we don't know what that number might look like, so it could be a big number. Those are what's outstanding. I don't have any more to tell you other than that's where we're at. From my discussions with Mercer yesterday, it sounds like it's not a big problem. It's just a matter of getting it through their channels to get it done.
So if I could just
Please.
make it clear from my perspective on this. I've been working to make sure that this goes through, appropriately and in accordance to what, we're negotiating for. Even this morning with you and with Cammie, ironing out some of the concerns I had from the document that was given to me last night.
Yes,
And I
thank
feel
you.
comfortable with that. I mean, there was language in there that I didn't, but you got me to the point to where I felt comfortable with what's happening. The overall problem that I have is I have made fun of politicians in the past who have said, let's just pass it and see what's in it without looking at it. And now you're asking me to do the same thing without actually looking at the agreement. And I really can't get there on this. I want to get there because I think this process has been one for us in which we have went back and forth to make sure it's worked and come together, as a commission and trying to drive this and direct it in a way. And frankly, with some of the things that I've heard, and they're saying, let's get this done, and then we don't get this done, it's kind of off to a rocky start if we don't start the right way. And that's my overall concern with this. If we don't have an agreement, you want me to say yes to it, even though it may be there, because until we have that thing in writing, until we actually have that thing ready to go, I do not feel comfortable with moving forward until we do it, until we have it.
And just so you know, I'm not saying you need to approve it. I'm saying that I'm giving you a status of where
Yes.
we are on the agreement. I do think that there's a timeliness issue here, and I think Cammie can respond to that timeliness issue of this because of the rollout. Unfortunately, I'm just telling you what's happened up to this point. I did a turnaround yesterday within about 6 hours, including I was in a meeting for about 4 of those hours. So I did try to do a quick turnaround to get it back to them. We're very close on the contract part of it. It just, we haven't ironed out those last little
My
details.
concern with the delay is not only the rollout with the liability the county's already exposed at why we're going here, but literally a delay of a week will cost the county literally thousands and thousands of dollars.
How?
Because the delay in training, we're not able to enter into an agreement until we sign a contract. So therefore, the data that we have to get, it delays everything. And the timing of the rollout with the training classes that are already scheduled, the more we delay, those dates are already set in stone. So the closer you get to those dates, obviously the cost for travel, the cost for trainings, all these things go up. Plus the time crunch on the people because our contract is still an October 7th rollout date. So anytime we continue to push that back and push that back, we start sacrificing potentially
And then I
units.
just want to make the commission aware that Workday's fiscal year is ending at the end
Today.
of, well, at the end of the week.
Before commission meeting.
Before the next commission meeting. So the prices that we've agreed to.
When
and-
okay, so wait, before the next commission meeting or at the end of
Be-
today?
Before April 30th.
By the end of the week, so
Okay, then I just
before-
needed a clarification on the exact time frame.
So if this is not something that we pass today, then we go back and we do it with their new prices and we start negotiating again with them.
Okay, but that's Workday, right? Robert,
With Workday.
Robert, we have everything we need from Workday,
We have
correct?
everything we need right now.
It won't hold the price?
It can't. They're a publicly
They're a
traded
publicly
company.
traded company, so their
Wh-
prices
why
will
can't
change
we
at the end
appro-
of their
Why
fiscal
can't we
year.
approve the Workday portion, but we haven't come to a contract agreement with the implementation company?
That's possible.
Well, that's the one that will cost us a lot of money though by delaying.
Well, but when we're
Wow.
talking about costing money, if they come back and don't have this data breach in the contract,
Well,
it's
but I'm not
permissible and it
recommending we
So
exposes the
we've done
county,
in We've done in the past where we said we're going to enter into agreement with this person pending this, and this. We have done that before. I'm not saying that's a great idea. I still think it's important for all of y'all to review the contract and to make sure that you're comfortable with it. But we do have 7 days in between when we'll meet again.
My big question is, knowing all this,
Yes.
it seems like this would be pretty high priority to get
It
the
is, but
contract
to be
to us.
fair, I mean, Rob sent them changes this morning from Carl's review.
Yes.
So it's not
So we
really
can't
fair to go
expect
back
them.
again
That's right.
when they just got the changes.
And by Rob's own words, he quote unquote minor.
Right.
So
But
if,
still,
well-
minor or not, there's still changes
Okay, but
in
here-
Right,
here's my
contract.
changes
question
that we changed, so
to
we
Rob.
need to give them, 24 hours in a business
my
day.
question is to Rob is,
fast.
these minor changes, not a one of these sound like any of the list of stipulations we gave you in the agreement. This sounds like what you told me was typical county stuff. So from the list the county commission gave you, have we satisfied every one of those requests with Mercer? To contract?
You mean in the scope? Yes, we've done that with the scope. Like, what we're trying to do with legal review is just to make sure that we're protected. Yes,
I understand.
yeah.
So we got everything we asked for. So my question is if you're terming a minor, again, I'm not saying these aren't important issues, minor or not. I'm saying we should approve it subject to, and we can again make that list, this, and this. And if it gets it, it's done, and one of those can be your review as well. But for those 5 things happening or whatever it is, then it's not approved. I mean, that's,
Let me also address Commissioner Ivy's point. You could approve the workday agreement today, but if you do so, I would recommend that you make it subject to approval of an implementer. I mean, because we don't have an implementer
Right.
contract completed and ready to be approved right this very second. I mean, it's so close, but we're
So-
still.
Right, and so that's part of my timing question is, it sounds like Workday is the portion that we're really against the time crunch on because of their fiscal year ending April 30th. So if we were to approve the Workday portion, subject to the implementation company, we would have met the Workday's timeline, but be able to have an actual written contract back to us for approval without screwing anybody's timeline up. But that,
no.
We're under a time
No,
crunch
no,
for both of them.
that
how's-
part's not factually true at the end because it's the Mercer
That's a
timeline
question,
for
so-
They're both.
implementation.
So Workday, as we can't register for training until we actually have a contract with Mercer. They won't send us the workbooks to put together the data until we have a contract. So we can't actually start getting the information for them until we have a signed contract. So we're already behind 1 week in getting that. Their start date was April 15th for
Yeah,
our
so we'll
timeline
be
to roll
behind
out by
2 weeks
October
by the
7th.
next time.
So
okay, Rob, let me ask you another question. Given your negotiation with these various entities, how quick do you anticipate that they would get back to us? End of the day?
Yes,
So,
I would think probably by noon.
so here's a hypothetical. Can we table this for a time period and continue on with our meeting? If necessary, recess our commission meeting so that the commission meeting is technically still active, giving them the opportunity to produce the document, and then reconvene and vote on it when we have an actual contract before us. Would that be
Yes.
That's something that would
Well,
be possible.
We could
That's a
table it.
fallacy, hold on.
We could table it now and then see if we have a response before the end of the meeting and then decide what to do
Well,
when we bring it back.
so here's the fallacy, not with what Commissioner Ivy's saying. You guys are gonna want another 18 hours to go review this and then sit down and give us a red line and do this and do that, and it's like,
Well, we're-
because you'll
of
need
course-
to.
Of course we want,
Right.
I want to review it.
Right, so that doesn't,
See the paper.
And
Has to be-
I'm asking if that gives us a time frame. I mean,
I don't see why that's
To-
not,
to
that
review
seems
it.
reasonable to me. That if we can get that contract, have a chance to review it, look down through it, maybe have some discussions if needed, necessary, and then take action on it
I mean,
the day. I'm
it
trying to look
might
at
be,
calendar to make
it-
sure we're not in some,
we have,
some of
we
us
have
won't be here.
Board of Equalization, but we could participate electronically, right? Again, if it's a recess portion, we could reconvene
We
at
could re-
I
3
just-
o'clock or,
we could recess, yeah, we could wait till the end of the day and see what occurs and then determine.
right? Because for me, I need to be able to read through what I'm voting on.
Definitely.
And so, but I want to try and make sure we do all we can to get it done today with still not abandoning that concept that, because if I have to vote right now, I'll tell you absolutely it's a no, because I will not vote on it if I don't have a finalized contract in front of me to review. I just cannot put the county at that type of a risk. I'm not comfortable with that.
Hey, motion to continue until we make up our mind.
well, how about table?
Table.
And can I ask, so if we get this contract by noon, how much time would you like to review it?
How,
Do we
I
want to
mean,
set
how
up a
many
meeting
pages?
with
I'd like to,
us?
It's lengthy.
A lot of what I think for me
It's actually
personally,
not that bad.
for me personally, I would be able, a lot of it will be covering things we've discussed previously in closed session. I would be happy to just sit down with Rob and
Can I enter my
and
vote
walk
in
through
now?
the
I will not be
highlights.
here later. With my grandfather who is suffering from a stroke, I have family commitments, sorry. I cannot be here later.
you call?
Not from ICU, I can't. That's my problem. The time constraint, I get it. I'm not saying that these are not reasonable, let's review it. But I'm talking about literally saving the money, and we, the commission, have dragged this with our attorneys for 5 months.
We can get it done today. I have
Right.
full confidence that you'll probably get done today.
Is it, do you have to enter your vote all at the same time, or
Well,
you do? I just don't know what
I
the
don't,
procedure is.
We'll just table it for now and then determine,
Okay.
see what develops. It would be my recommendation.
Motion to table.
Second,
okay, I have a motion and a second to table, agenda item, which number are we on?
6.
Number 6, all in favor, say aye.
aye?
Aye. Okay.
I just got a text from Mercer saying we just agreed to everything, so we'll get you that.
So
right
we'll
now.
see, we'll be able to get the document.
Okay, so we'll be able to have that and hopefully very quickly then.
In fact, let me go up to my office. I'll print out clean versions of that with what we discussed, and
Okay,
we'll
fair
have it-
enough.
We'll have it
Right.
for
Next.
you, hopefully within the next hour.
Right. That's
Fantastic.
fantastic.
Okay, let's go on to number 7. This is adopt a resolution amending the provisions of the Utah County procurement rules and regulations. And there's, the amended version has been downloaded for consideration. Any thoughts? That the whole process behind this, was to bring this back to the commission, to take, review committees, make them review committees, not selection committees. There's some language in there, for it to give us 5 in the way of their tabulations, final companies, and then it would come before the commission for a selection of those 5 that are in there. Any thoughts?
I would like to continue this for a week based on the conversation yesterday from Brian and Robert. I think that's prudent that we get information on how Salt Lake County and other entities do this. I liked, and the state, I kind of wanted to hear. I don't know if you were able to get that already. If so, then I'd be willing to move now, but I'd kind of like to hear.
I'm certainly not objected to that, but I'd be happy to have a few questions answered prior to that action.
Sure.
Just to note that I think there's a pending request for proposals that they were trying to get out today or tomorrow, so I don't know how that would.
I would, if we're gonna table it, I would prefer that we probably table that for a week as well, so that we can be in compliance one way or the other after we make a decision. I mean, I'm fine with, if we wanna table it for a week and go through a process, and look at it. I know that Robert came and we made a few minor changes, yesterday to hopefully his satisfaction with it, but it would be nice, this has been discussed, it has
Like-
on multiple levels back and forth, and so.
I guess let me re-ask, because after we did make those changes, did you still have the concern? Because you raised a question, then we did add these changes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the only thing that I wanted clarification, Robert and I both talked, he can correct me if he has additional, but it was just on the further negotiations, just wanted to see the intent there, because our biggest concern would be just, that those further negotiations, which are very important, as we know, as we just witnessed with, the Mercer agreement and that, but we would just want to caution and make sure that it didn't change the scope of the original RFP at some point during that.
So
So
be
we just
more
wanted to
specific.
understand your intent on what would be involved in further negotiations.
Let's get there, and maybe, Dave, unless you're there already, have you,
It's section 3-215, the award
Subsection 2.
2.
Is it under one of the red lines or the amended?
It's
a red line.
line. yeah.
Red
The
line.
second paragraph of the two that are redlined there together.
Yeah.
and so, again, what's the?
I
what's
think
the
what I'm
concern?
looking for is just to explain what your intent or what you see that, how broad further negotiations are. I think they're very important, you kind of fine tune in that, but the concern is, just as a reminder, we don't want to affect the scope of the original process. I don't think that's anything this current
So if we
commission.
struck paragraph 2, you're okay with everything else, in other words?
Well, I think it's important, it's there, I want to understand the scope.
Sure.
And I don't have any problem with our current
Yeah.
commission, but if you, down the road, who knows?
Sure.
How that could be interpreted by future commissions, and just want to
So-
make sure that you kind of have a parameter.
So if we read that, further negotiations, notwithstanding the provisions in section 3-215B or 1, the Board of County Commissioners may make the award of the contract subject to further negotiations and modifications deemed to be in the best interest of the county, and the award of the contract shall be subject to the county and the offers entering into the contract acceptable to the county. And the reason why that's in there is to kind of clarify what we're already doing. We are already saying that we don't make the award final until we've gone through the offer, the negotiations as stipulated. That's, and so I don't, that was just added more on the sense that we're just putting it into writing something that we already do. So that the award is not, the award doesn't mean that it's just awarded until we actually have the contracts in place.
I think, Robert Baxter, Purchasing Manager, yeah, I think that the concern is that we would not be departing from the original scope of the RFP. There'd be,
Well, let's add that in there. So if we added it and said further negotiations and modifications deemed to be in the best interest of the county within the scope of the original RFP, does that satisfy?
See, and that's,
We could add there after county comma, without substantial change to the scope of the RFP.
yeah, and that's fair. I mean, and that goes back to another discussion that we've had when it comes to RFPs and how important it is that we
Sure.
have in the RFPs the documentation that is appropriate, the language that is appropriate, in the way of the process. So, I mean, I would.
Because if there was more than substantial change, we'd do what we have done in past practices and cancel the RFP
Yeah,
and start over.
Right.
Right, exactly. We
And
always
this-
have that option too.
This is for protection.
Sure,
essentially.
that's a
Okay, so
acceptable
was
recommendation.
when you were saying that, was it after the best interest of the county portion, or were you saying at the end?
No, after the best interest of the county, comma, without substantial change to the scope of the request for proposal, comma, and then go on, and the award.
Okay, any
Yeah,
other questions?
That makes sense,
Yeah.
yeah. So just a quick one in relationship to, it's actually the same section, 3-215 on the award, the first paragraph. At the end of that, it goes through, it says, "The Board of County Commissioners shall determine which offers proposals in the best interest of the county after considering all applicable factors." Do you think that's a sufficient verbiage, or do we need to have some findings in there to protect us a little bit more? Does that make sense? I want to make sure that we're not becoming too subjective in that paragraph and that we're maintaining objective qualifications in the selection process. Is that clearly stated enough?
Well,
I'm just
down in,
wondering-
if
And
you look
that's-
at,
This discussion.
Yeah, this is just kind of a discussion, maybe a recommendation, like, do we need to use a stronger word like objective findings as justification for the award to another entity that wasn't one of the recommendations? Is that,
If you look down on subsection 3, the award documentation, there it does require that there be a written determination and showing the basis on which the award was found to be the most advantageous.
okay.
So I think subsection 3,
Covers that?
Covers that.
Yeah, okay, because that was with the addition. I just wanted to make sure we were strong enough there that we weren't wandering out into the subjective weeds on these type of awards, that we're staying objective so that we stay close in relationship to state statute and guidelines, so that we're not wandering off in the distance, but that we're adhering to state, protocol and guidelines, but still giving ourselves some additional flexibility there in that. So if you feel that that's sufficient,
Yeah,
that
as
was
long
my
as-
main question.
as long as we keep in mind that subsection 3, where it does require a written determination, where you would list the factors on,
Okay.
that form the basis for your conclusion.
What was the thinking behind going from 3 to 5?
I'll address that and jump in too, because it was your recommendation. So I was the one that recommended the 3. It wasn't based off of anything necessarily that.
Sure, because
I just
top
thought
3 makes
top,
sense.
top 3, I mean, everyone says top 3, it kind of felt like a top 3. Robert came to me yesterday and said, why? And I said, I'm not married to the top 3. It was just kind of that, instead of
So
just
more
having one.
flexibility.
And then he recommended and said, well, if we went to 5, I think it would cover, the thought was, why don't we just have them ranking all of them? So if we have 10, they rank them all, but as you know, as we go through an RFP process, sometimes there's ones that don't meet the qualifications.
Sure.
And so they're easily dropped off because they actually didn't submit everything we wanted. We
Right.
didn't want to have a ranking all the way to that point.
Okay.
And so Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but his thinking was, if we went to 5, we'd probably cover a big enough
Okay.
group.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, just from my experience, sometimes by the time you get to 5, you do pretty much have the clear range. Anything below that, but
I was just gonna say, because some of our RFPs have only had 5, that's why,
Right.
that's why I'm like,
no,
Only
it's just,
2.
yeah, right.
Too, yeah.
but, for example, I think it was really good with our HRIS, and we had a group of 4 or 5, I think, there that we really started narrowing down on, and you got a really good feel from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
So that was just our recommendation to be more inclusive.
And it does give us, a better, and we always have the option of rejecting the whole thing and starting all over if
Oh, yeah.
needed and necessary. If we look at the 5 and say that doesn't fulfill
Well,
what
yeah, no,
needs
it
to be
doesn't
done.
bind us. I just wondered, because it was stricken, and I wasn't on the copy that I had originally, so. Okay, I'm okay. I have no further questions for myself.
I don't?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think from what I've seen, if we do go forward with this, I'm satisfied with the way it's written and if we do go forward with it, but I did want to give my opinion as a purchasing manager that my preference would be not to go forward with it. Simply because my preference would be to have the selection committees and the departments from which these RFPs come, be the ones to make the selection with the commissioners having the veto power. That's my preference. And I think mostly, and this is nothing about you as individuals, but I think as a procedural thing, and this is something that will still apply a year from now, 10 years from now, who knows how long, and who knows who will be in your seats in 15 years. In my opinion, I think it gives the commissioners a little bit too much arbitrary power. I think that the subject matter experts who study these these RFPs and the selection committees that make the selection, the potential is there that two commissioners could completely disregard that and pick their favorite. And that's a little bit unsettling to me. My hope would be that that isn't what would happen, but I think this would open that door for that to happen, potentially. And so I just wanted to state that as my opinion on it.
Appreciate that. Do you think there's in the current framework, still getting to a recognition that it is a recommendation, that we could tighten that down a little bit more to find a better balance there? If you, I mean, you're expressing you feel it's maybe a shift too much in one way. Is there somewhere there that there's maybe a better balance spot in the verbiage or in how we're approaching that?
I'm not sure how you would do that because, I mean, the way it's written, the way this is written now, it's just a recommendation and it's not in any way binding to the Board of Commissioners.
Also because that's actually more language because by law, they can't approve a contract, only the Board of Commissioners can.
That's true.
So that's kind of how we viewed it, and quite
Well-
honestly, I see your concern, trust me, I agree, but at the same time, this has been a body that even under your current example, we wouldn't be having number 6 discussion actually if that's, you know what I mean? Because
Well,
the
and it-
recommending committee selected a different group.
Well, and that's sort of where I'm coming from, because as it stands today, if the Board of Commissioners don't approve of the selection committee's selection, you can stop it. You have that ability already. What this change would do is give you the ability to, well, as it stands today, if the selection committee made a selection, and you could reject that, which would either mean that we'd go to the number 2 selection, or we throw it out and start over. But as this change would make it, you could throw out what the selection committee said and pick somebody, number 3, 4, or 5 down on the list, and disregard, say, number 2.
So I think that's an interesting point. So then the question becomes, why are we expanding it to 5 and not tightening it down to 2 or 3?
Well, in for a penny, in for a pound, I guess.
Right. I think that's kind of the inherent pushback there, because I think there's some validity to what you're saying, because there certainly could be hypothetically 2 commissioners team up that love number 7 for some unknown arbitrary reason, and so
We had stock in
they're
them.
done. Yeah, well, and
That's what happened in Washington, right?
There is a conflict of interest.
there is a
policy in there.
conflict of
yes.
interest policy built in, but so if that's a concern, should we tighten it down and force us to pick out of the top 2 or 3 as opposed to broadening it? I think, is that a control mechanism that kind of holds our feet to the fire of the recommendation board a little bit more? That would be kind of my question and pushback there, to where I would almost actually be more inclined to support the top 2 or 3, because it would to some degree hold our feet to the fire,
Give
but
the
still
subject
giving
matter
us,
experts and-
still giving us some flexibility there, to put in our broader perspective, as the political ramification, the ramification on the employees, the taxpayer dollars, all of those components, and still make an objective decision.
I think that's a good point.
I think that was why we had 3 originally, probably, to have a little
Smaller.
more scope, but whatever.
I would be happy personally to amend that back to 3 then and keep it smaller, to kind of try and keep us,
Let's go to 11.
a little.
1.5.
there.
Yeah, 1.5, yeah, there you go.
So
If 20 apply, then it's up to 18. No.
I put a formula in there, that's what we do with everything else. So if I can make just kind of a general comment on this, and then we talked a little bit about this. In our form of government that we have 3 executives, and it's the commissioners. If we had a different form of government where we had just one executive or a county administrator, a lot of these would be different discussions altogether, because they would run it in a totally different fashion. I've talked with some executives, and in some regards, it's a balance that we have, and it's a check on power just by the nature of the 3 executives that we have here. The problem how this came up in looking at it is that there's along the way, there's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it, even to the formulation of the evaluation committee. With something like this, it does, I'll admit, it lessens the evaluation committee's total overall importance, let's put it that way. I think it also puts them in a perspective where they can speak out and say whatever they want, with, hopefully without, commission input, because we know we're gonna be able to review it, but it allows the commission some flexibility on the end to see a broader perspective and not just looking at more myopic of what's happening with, the newest gadget or the newest program that's on there. They can say, this is how it will work in my department, this is how it won't work, and then we'll have to look at it on a broader perspective. But as I see it now, this really, as it's been implemented in the past, it really restricts the executive power of the county. And part of that comes into play because of 3 executives that we have. And so this does, it does give the executive hat, which we have, a little broader oversight and control over what's going on. And I think it frees up more discussion on the underside. And that's the reason why I like it. Any other thoughts?
I think if we're kind of moving forward on thoughts, I actually would like to move it back to the 3 ranked myself.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I wanted to be sensitive to Robert's thoughts on that, and that's the reason I said,
That's-
to me, again, I wasn't married to the 3. I put the 3 in there, in talking with Dave, and that's kind of, because we went back and forth and said, why don't we open them all? Let's open it back. And we said, why don't we just kind of take it down to the 3? So I could live with that too.
And, because I think if you're giving us 3 with ranked preferences and your scorecards, and you come before us in commission meeting and argue, you're gonna have a pretty powerful tool in helping us understand why we should go with your pick. And we've got to justify pretty heavily why we shouldn't, right? And have a good dialogue there, which, in my opinion, generally gets us to the best decision.
I have a slightly different opinion at this point. The more I've heard Robert speak, the more I look at this and say, fundamentally for me, my problem is when legislators give themselves more power because they take away the power. And I'm somebody who has trust in our people. And again, the commission has already the authority. If the people who are making those decisions on the review committees, we can control the review committees. We control whether there's an RFP. And so now we're going to control the review. And so I think anytime you highlight and create more importance or more task for yourself to oversee people, it becomes troublesome. And not that that's what's going on here necessarily, but for me personally, that to me is what's been kind of the decline in American politics these days. So the more I've heard you say that, that's what's creeping out to me and thinking, yeah, it does need some fixing. The RFP process needs some fixing to me. Because it's still troublesome that I have people come and accuse people of hiring their buddies to come and do contracts. That's obviously what we're trying to prevent. But at the same time, I don't know that this is the answer because, again, we can always reject it and tell you, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, whatever. So, I don't know. That's just my thoughts as I've heard some of these comments right here.
So can I ask you a question? then?
Sure, absolutely.
So, then where, I mean, because as we looked at the selection committees and others, and I think we all agreed to a certain extent that they can be engineered for an outcome.
Agreed. That's why I say it's broken. It needs some fixing.
Yeah.
And I'm not accusing us of trying to make a power grab, but that's what when I hear him say that, I want to make sure we're being very careful. That's all I'm saying because I was in those conversations yesterday. I agree with, I mean, I think we're all 3 on the same page that we're trying to prevent what we're potentially being accused of doing. We're trying to prevent and make sure we're protecting because we have the accountability. At the same time, I just want to make sure that we're very careful about that process and that we are still respecting the process, which we are, but it's concerning to me that these concerns are coming. I mean.
And I see that. And one of the biggest challenges I had with the old way was that when the selection committee, and we could not even be a part of the selection committee, And it could come as a recommendation, and then it comes as a recommendation before us in a commission meeting. Maybe we see it on Friday, because we're not a part of the process. And we see the selection committee's recommendation, well, selection, not even a recommendation, a selection on Friday, and then we're voting on it on Tuesday, and we're trying to play catch-up and ask questions along the way between Friday and Tuesday morning. And the only option we have is to accept their selection or reject it. And then if we reject it, then we have to send it back to them again to say, well, are you gonna send number 2 or not? Or are you gonna send number 3? Or maybe we reject the whole thing and then the whole thing goes away. And usually, as I've seen these RFPs come down the process, we're usually running up against timelines.
Yes.
And we gotta get this done, we gotta get this done. And so if we see it not sitting in a selection committee or not having that ultimate review of it, we run the risk of putting the county in more jeopardy in the future
Agreed.
without the information, and not saying, well, what is the best and what's not the best?
That's why I say, I'm not in disagreement with where we're at. I just felt compelled to say that because it's concerning a little bit, at the same time. And-
Commissioners, I'm wondering though how this change would resolve that issue.
Well, my hope is that with knowing that we have the total review and selection in the end, it would give us the opportunity to sit in on these selection committees, because right now, when we do RFPs, my question is, I want to be on that selection committee. I need to be on that selection committee. And I remember coming up to you at one point in time and saying, I want to be on that selection committee. And the thought was, well, commissioners don't really sit on selection, not that they haven't, but they really don't sit on selection committees. And so that's kind of new. Well, now we've gone through a process where all of us are saying, oh, I want to be on that selection committee. And these take days. There's lots of days invested into them sitting on these selection committees. If we could have a recording of them, if we could review what's going on, have the materials, what would happen is that selection committee's overall, the amount of information that's given and the selection coming back, in this case, it would be a review. The review coming back takes a different role and a different perspective. And in sitting in those selection committees like that we have now, it goes in so many different directions, and especially when you have commissioners sitting in there, because they start saying, wait a second, what about this? And then it drives it into a whole different realm. And so I'd like to see us on those review committees, if I can call them that, the review committees actually be able to say, this is what we're looking at, this is the scope that we have, this is where we're at, how does that fit with your organization? And they can not have to worry so much about all the other stuff that comes in, especially when commissioners jump into that process as well. And I think this gets us to a point to where we have that kind of flexibility and that opportunity to work it through a more purer process and get to something that will be advantageous for the county. Plus, nevertheless, no matter what happens, either through the selection process, the review process, and the ultimate selection process, the commissioners are the ones that are ultimately going to have to bear the responsibility for it on a political standpoint or any other way. And so the information and how it runs through, I think, should be as clean as possible.
And you're the one signing the contract, so.
Yeah, well, with their approval too.
Yeah, we are the ones that sign that, so it's,
Well, and I think there's a difference a little bit. The RFPs we're talking about, like the HRIS one or the architectural one, these are big multi-million-dollar decisions molding the county for years to come. I think I understand that when we create a policy that everybody thinks that we have to do it on everyone. I don't think we're talking about necessarily sitting on, I'll use an example from last year, the gel remodel of the showers. We don't need to sit in on the contractors, but because it's budgeted, we've already had those discussions and, but when we're talking multi-million-dollar investments that, are going to be the future of this county for 10, 20, 30 or more years. Yeah, dang right, we will. From beginning to end, we're involved.
And I think you mentioned, because we had that conversation a little bit too. Obviously, I don't think there's an interest for us to sit in on and talk about nuts and bolts, and although that's under our different realm, but still, I think you mentioned there's only maybe 6 or 8 of these that really fit kind of what we're talking about here on a yearly basis, if that.
I think if, obviously this is a shift. I think if we tighten down the number to 3, I feel comfortable with the shift from my perspective. And the great part about a shift in policy or a legislative process is if it's not perfect, there's a beautiful path to go back and tweak it and make it better. So it's always important to remember that these types of things aren't things that are set in stone. As we work through this process, if we find holes that have been created or maybe not patched good enough, we can always come back and readdress them and tweak it so that we get things right in the end.
And that was gonna be my statement too, is that with the pending RFP that we have, is that we move forward with potentially, my motion's going to end up being with moving it to 3 and Dave's added verbiage that Renee wrote down for us, knowing that we can, again, come back and, I mean, we've gotten here because we've kept moving the RFPs and trying to get them to where we all feel comfortable with them from everybody's standpoint. And again, I'm open to, especially because this doesn't have to go back to planning commission or anything, I'm open to discussions at any time on, modifying it here or there, so.
And we have a test pilot one ready to go
Yeah.
today.
So, any other discussion then?
No, I
Okay, I will move that we adopt the resolution with the stated changes, those two being in 3, is it 3-215?
Yes.
Yes.
Amending from 5 back to 3, and the verbiage that Dave said, adding the substantial change to, I'm paraphrasing, the substantial change to the RFP,
With the RFP,
with the
yes.
RFP. I know I saw her type it when Dave said it earlier, so.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to adopt the resolution amending the provision change as stated, number 7, with the changes noted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0.
Mr. Chairman, just want to say thank you for that good discussion. I think we've arrived at something that actually will tighten up things all the way around.
Yeah, it's great discussion. Okay, number 8, do we need to talk about these in general or specific with everyone? What's
Just
your-
in general, Dave, the general question is do you, as I've read through these, it feels to me like, 1, they're better management practices, and 2, it also seemed like these brought us in line significantly better with state code in our policies and practices there. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Just on a procedural basis, I just need to note that Commissioner Graves stepped out for just a second.
Yeah, it's not really a state code issue, but it's more a policy in trying to, along with the trust, which provides our coverage, to manage and to try to minimize the costs associated with insurance and workers' comp claims, and try to maintain a safe and safer environment for the county employees.
That was my question, that answered it. Thank you.
You're supposed to continue talking until he got back.
Well, that's sure. So Dave, what are some of the anticipated outcomes from these particular changes?
One item that we're trying to pull into this review process would be accidents, including workers' compensation claims, so that there could be a review and try to find the underlying factors as to why those accidents might have occurred, and then to address those, to try to not have reoccurrences of similar accidents in the future. So it's really an emphasis on workplace safety, and the trust has been very cooperative and provided a lot of assistance to try to help us minimize those risks, which in turn reduce the dollars that are expended.
Has the Accident Review Board gone through and set some goals or standards that they had hoped to achieve so that we can measure how effective these changes are being?
The accidents are tracked, including by each department, and so the trust actually helps us with regard to the tracking of those claims. And so periodically, we get reports that show where those claims are occurring, and so we hope to see a reduction in those going forward.
Do we have a goal?
Actually, we do. The goal is to reduce our EMOD factor down to, at least down to 1, hopefully below 1, because it has crept up in recent years. I think we're at 1.21 currently. So the goal is to get that to at least 1, and then once we reach that point, try to get it to maybe down to 0.8 or even lower.
Perfect. And you're saved by Greg from additional questions.
Yes.
I was out of answers.
All right, Commissioner Graves is back in our meeting. Any other questions on, let's just do them individually, 8, 9, and 10. Any other questions on 8? Okay, a motion to be in order on number 8.
Move that we adopt a resolution amending the Utah County Risk Management Program as noted in regular agenda item number 8.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt the resolution as stated in number 8 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0. Number 9.
Move that we adopt the resolution stated in regular agenda item 9.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as stated in number 9 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Number 10.
I'll move that we adopt an ordinance amending the Utah County Code Article 2-4 Accident Review Board as stated in number 10.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance as stated number 10 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
Can I, before we set our closed meetings real quick?
Sure.
Question for Dave is clarification on number 6. Since we are going to table and our contract that we've been referring to is with Mercer, do we need to approve a portion of that to get to that? Or because it says either and we've obviously,
But we tabled currently the whole agenda item number
that's my
6.
point is, but in order to go and talk about one specifically, do we need to take an action?
Well, I don't think we need to
Okay.
right now. If we
That
bring it
was-
back, we can make that
Okay,
decision.
I just wanted to make sure because
So just bringing it back. I'm not sure I was following you.
well, I didn't know if, because the contract that we're working on right now is not the Workday one. That one's been done for a little while. We're working on the Mercer one. But the item says collaborative or Mercer, so I didn't know if we needed to take part of the action in that
Oh, I see what you're saying.
and go, that way we could then talk about Mercer. That's what I was just clarifying.
Oh, because we haven't defined yet.
Right.
Well, yeah, we can deal with that. So, when it comes up. Okay, so on the closed meetings, we need, let's see, I didn't circle them, so I gotta make sure and get the right ones. 14, 13, there was one that we didn't need. Which one was it that we didn't need? So we don't need number 11. Is that correct from your calculations?
What I,
So we can strike number 11, but we'll need 12, 13, and 14.
you're up.
Move that we strike regular agenda item number 11.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to strike regular agenda item number 11. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date and time and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the sale of real property, water rights, or water shares previously publicly noticed for sale for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve number 12 as stated on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to approve number 13 as stated in the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 That passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 14 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, we have a couple of work sessions. One And Ralph, are you doing this, or you have others that are coming up? Ralph will kind of, why don't you go ahead and introduce that, and then we have another second work session from Rocky Mountain Power. Kathy's here.
Commissioners, you're probably aware that we continue in Utah County and throughout the state of Utah, actually, to exceed the PM 2.5 fine particulate standard. And because we did not meet the deadline for attainment that was in the Clean Air Act, we're moving into what's considered a serious non-attainment area for PM 2.5. And as I approached the commission, there was an interest in learning what that means to us as a county and to the citizens of the county and to the state. And so we've invited Mark Berger and Bill Reese from the Utah Department of Air Quality to come and kind of address that with us and answer any questions you might have about the PM 2.5 process, which will involve a new state implementation plan for that process. I'll turn the time to them.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Bill Reese. I'm with the Planning Branch of Division of Air Quality, and I've prepared just a little explanation by way of background and kind of current status report of where we are and why, and certainly then I would entertain any questions you may have. I'll just kind of jump right in. As Ralph said, we're a PM 2.5, which is fine particulate non-attainment area already down here in Utah County. All non-attainment areas are initially classified as moderate areas, and then in the instance where you reach your attainment date, which is assigned kind of under the Clean Air Act, you look back at your data for 3 years, and if you're in attainment, that's great. If you're not, then the situation arises where you can be reclassified as a serious non-attainment area. And that's kind of the juncture we're at right now where we find ourselves. Our attainment date was the end of 2015. Actually, it's a long and sordid story. It started in 2014, but we produced a plan that looked at that date, 2015, and that is our current plan right now, our moderate SIP. And the conclusion we drew at that time was that it would be unlikely for us to attain the standard. And in fact, our air monitors bore out that prediction. And in fact, we did not attain with the 3 years of data we looked at. And so the EPA, as is their responsibility, looked at that data as well and proposed to reclassify us as a serious PM 2.5 non-attainment area. And as Ralph alluded to, once reclassified as serious, we have to then go back and revisit our plan. We turned in our moderate area plan. We will now be compelled to produce a serious area plan, which sort of builds on that moderate plan we've already done.
Can I ask you a question before?
Absolutely.
You said us. Who's us when you're talking about the plan? You talking about the region? Are you talking about the county? Are you talking about the regional area? Who's us?
Us, yeah, I'm sorry. I use that all the time. That would be we, the state, who has been delegated the authority by the EPA under the Clean Air Act to administer the obligations therein. And as the state undertakes that business, we certainly look to partner with all affected entities, be they local government entities, affected stakeholders, the regulated community, and whatnot. So it's kind of a comprehensive process where we seek to involve all those who will be affected, and the county, of course, is on that list. Your MPO, for instance, the Mountain Land Association of Governments, is integral in our planning by way of assessing the impact from the on-road motor vehicle fleet that rolls around town, and we interface with them routinely as they do their transportation planning. There's a mechanism that compels us to work together on that. So
does the fact that we're moving to serious mean that our plan from them is not adequate?
No, it does not. It means that we just have to revisit this in a quantitative analysis. Again, this plan will build on the last plan, but underlying any of these plans is a quantitative analysis where we have an air model that looks at all kinds of things, including emissions from the various sectors of our society. We have our motor vehicle fleet, we have our heavy industry, we have our light industry, we have, things of that nature. We roll that all into there with our geography and our chemistry and outspit some kind of prediction. So we'll go revisit that.
Is it broken out by watersheds, by airsheds?
It is. It is. There are, in fact, 3 non-attainment areas here in the state, Utah County being one of them, part of Utah County, actually. And the point of the mountain kind of divides that from the Salt Lake non-attainment area, and then there's a third up in Logan. So, yeah, all 3 areas the state will be looking at.
Are you open for more questions? Just help me understand this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's slightly confusing for me. When we was at a town hall here recently on the Road to Understanding, hosted by KSL, the data was put forth, I don't remember who from, I think it was DEQ or the Air Division, that our emissions are significantly actually decreasing and we're improving our air. And so to me, when you say, well, you're actually getting better, but you're getting worse because you're now serious non-attainment, that seems
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
counterintuitive to me. Just help me understand that, how that works.
Okay, the way that works is what we're really trying to hit, our target, is what is called a National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And that's a health-based standard that is set by panels of doctors and all kinds of health experts. And that sits right now at a level of 35 micrograms of PM 2.5 for every cubic meter of air that we measure.
Okay.
And that's the target we're trying to hit. We began looking at this in about 2012, and our target date at the time was 2014. We looked at it. We didn't think we could get there probably until maybe 2019. Then the courts forced us to look at it again with an eye towards specifically 2015. Still didn't look like we were going to get there. And in fact, as I said, we have monitors here in Linden and North Provo, and they tell us that even though the air is getting better, we're not quite yet at that level of the health standard, that 35 microgram target that we're trying to hit. So as we glide down that path and approach that, we're still trying to get under that line where the doctors say we really need to be to protect public health.
Okay.
So
How close are we getting, and do we have some new projections?
we don't have some new projections yet. I think the general trend says we are improving, and that's in spite of our rapid growth in population, which of course drives emissions upward. We are making progress. We're still not there. Our new target will be 2019. So that's essentially the issue, is that we keep delaying the expected juncture of when we would reach that. So under this new serious area plan, we will be assigned a new date to look at. That date will be 2019 to start. And we will make our quantitative assessments and see if in fact we think we could get under that line. If we can't, however, the act affords us an additional 5 years to look at. So essentially we have a 5-year window. And so that's what we'll begin to look at. And as you say, where are we now and what can we expect? Very good questions. The answer, however, is a little bit uncertain. I think, as everybody knows here, we wrestle with a short-term standard. It's a 24-hour standard. Now, there's also an annual standard. And as far as the annual average for PM 2.5 goes, we're pretty good. We're under that line, and we don't have problems with that. It's the short-term, 24-hour standard. And
How many days of the year do we hit that? Not very
This
many.
is the point I'm about to get to, is it depends on the winter. I mean, on average, it's probably 7 or 8 or 15 days that might give us trouble. But every winter is different. And the way the standard is written, we can tolerate about 8 of these days that are over the 35 microgram health standard before we actually get a failing grade for that year. And in order to sort of iron out the seasonal variability that we know we have affecting us, the standard tells you to look at a 3-year rolling average of these numbers, so it kind of irons out the seasonal variability. And so we're continuing to collect data all the way through as we develop this plan. And by the time we get done with it, we'll still have data that we haven't measured yet. And so that will establish for us a reference point and let us know whether we're likely to attain by 2019 or whether we need to request an extension of that attainment date. So
Okay.
does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
It brings up another one. From my understanding, scientifically, we're doing a lot and putting a lot of resources and effort into understanding why particulate matter tends to form in our valleys here. You know, obviously we have some geography, the lake, against some arid stuff, the inversion. So it's interesting to discover why it's forming. What scientific efforts are being made to understand if we can actually reverse that process and help break the particulate matters from forming outside of just don't drive your car, right? Is there things scientifically that in the scientific community we're looking at to say, hey, we're starting to get a better understanding of why these are forming. How can we reverse that chemical process to prevent them from forming in the first place?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I don't think we can reverse the process. It's really driven by the seasonal window where we have the cold temperatures and the humidity and the low sunlight and all those conditions that kind of exacerbate the chemical formations that create this secondary PM. And then we also have, as everybody knows, the temperature inversion at the same time, which caps the dispersion of the air from our valleys. In the off seasons, you know, we may be producing these same emissions, but they disperse, they blow away, and they don't build up and create this problem for us. So those are the constraints of what we have to deal with, and the only thing we can really affect are the emissions that contribute the ingredients to making this secondary PM. Now, the understanding of that is improving all the time, and as we revisit our plan, we're actually using an updated, newer scientific model that evaluates all that chemistry. So we do have a better understanding, and I think we've added at least one contributor to that in the last go-round. So that would be the volatile organics that typically we worry about in the summer for ozone. We understand those now to be a key player in the stepping stones to these chemical reactions that ultimately lead to the particulate that is of the health concern. So we have another target now, and we addressed that a lot in our moderate plan. We'll go back and revisit that again in the serious plan. But again, that's the constraints we have to work with.
Given some recent studies and findings that we are, as particularly it sounds like in the summer months, facing an influx even from China, from pollution and trade winds, is that an area of significant concern, moderate concern? How will that influence us overall? Obviously, our major problems are in the winter, but do we think additional pollution globally with those trade winds, specifically from China, could potentially have some negative effects upon us during our summer months when those wind patterns tend to shift that pollution here?
Right, another good question. I think those pop up in some pollutants. Mercury is a good example. But in the particulate, the PM 2.5, in the case of that, I don't think it really has much of an effect. These again are winter conditions when the air is very, very constrained by the temperature inversion, and it's very isolated from the rest of the atmosphere, and so it's all homegrown right here.
We do have, tier 3 gas and a few things are headed this direction. Yeah, there's a lot of questions I have on where we actually get those numbers and those levels from. But nevertheless, that's a congressional type of a question. But is the science getting to the point, because when we look at trails and we're trying to get rid of the little goat heads, I just found out the other day they sick the bugs on it to eat them. And so I'm just wondering if the science will actually catch up, going back to your point, to where it could be seeded or something like that would allow us to get underneath that level. But my main concern is that if we get to that level, are they going to change the goalposts on us and move it? And because they do that over and over and over. They say, okay, because their monitors can only monitor so far, and then all of a sudden they get more and more monitorization, then get deeper and deeper, and then it just keeps moving down. And it's an economic concern for us. You know, as we get to these serious levels of non-attainment and other things, pretty soon, they're gonna be imposing stuff on us that's gonna be, economically hard.
Yes, yes, and I think that is a concern. I think it's likely that it will happen again, and maybe I'll just take a moment and explain to you why that is. The way the Clean Air Act is structured compels the EPA to make these health standards for a short list of pollutants, particulate matter being one of them. And the way it's written is that the EPA is obligated to go back and look at the health impacts and reassess whether the standards are set at a level that is protective enough of public health every 5 years, okay? So they do this, and for a long time, they kind of sat there and didn't really attend to this. They felt that the standards were good enough, we were still making progress, and that was good enough. Of late, though, there have been other interests that have used the courts to compel EPA to live up to this 5-year obligation. And then it kind of falls upon the doctors to look at the epidemiological data and make an assessment. And so far, the human body doesn't seem to have any kind of a threshold behavior above which there's no adverse health impact. So it seems like every time they look at this, the doctors tell them it has to be lower and lower and lower. So in 1997, they set it at 65. In 2006, they lowered it to 35. That's when we ran into our trouble with the standard. And 2012, they looked at it again. They left alone the 24-hour standard, which is the one we wrestle with. They lowered, however, the annual standard from 15 to 12. We still sit under the line with that. But, 5 years from 2012 is what? 2017? Isn't that about where we are? So I'm sure somebody will be anxious for the EPA.
But you know what's ironic about what you just said, 99, 95 or 96, whatever year you quoted, the average life span in this area was greater than it is now when they lowered the standards, so go figure.
Right.
Right,
Go
the science
figure.
doesn't match the data.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Well, the Clean
We
Air
all
Act
want
was
clean air.
authorized.
We don't
did.
want to, we
We
all
do.
want clean air, but it's the measurement that kind of confuses me at times, because we can take our air right now, we can take it back only a number of years ago and monitor it, and we'd actually say that was mountain air.
Right, right. I think we're making tremendous progress, really. I mean, I've been around long enough where we didn't even call this PM 2.5 yet. It was PM 10.
Right.
And we cleaned that up. The levels were pretty high back then.
Can I ask you a question on?
Yeah.
We, in the way of our air and then what we can do, it's been explained to me that we have done about 95%. This is just kind of a number. We're looking at the last 5%. Is that kind of close in the ball game?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair.
That last 5% that we're talking about, though, has a lot of consequences. I mean, in the way of economic, to change, we're talking about even right down to the way we function as a society. That 5% is what we're looking at now and we're bouncing back and forth within that. We've done a lot of the 95%. Now we're just right down in here, and that's the tough 5 right there.
It is. And we're really kind of optimistic about this tier 3. I think, as you look at the pie where all these emissions come from, I think everybody recognizes by now that, about half of these pollutants that cause this problem we have are born of tailpipe emissions. And so this is yet another significant step along the way to cleaning up these vehicles. Tier 3 follows Tier 2, which followed Tier 1, which, followed nothing at all. And so there's been tremendous progress.
Well, but the question is I would have on our tailpipe emissions. I mean, it was several years ago, and I forget the year, that Utah County changed their gas standards during the winter months to help do some of this. And yet now we've gone into Sirius. We all get worse gas mileage. We've elevated down into up to Sirius, and yet, and
Well,
that's the
let me,
frustration that we can't explain to people. And it's like, okay, because
Right.
they're like, well, I'm doing my part. I turn it off in the drive-ins. I do, whatever. Drive-throughs, I should say. Drive-ins quit being existing
Well,
around here a
Andrew-
long time ago.
I understand the frustration. I think though, if you go back, that was oxyfuel, if I'm not mistaken. And
Right.
what that was ethanol, which we now blend into our gasoline because of the corn farmers at 10%. At that time, we were looking at adding 2 to 3%. And the goal was to reduce carbon monoxide emissions. That's another one of those standards for which EPA needs to write a health standard. And at that time, we were in violation of the health standards for carbon monoxide. But vehicles have become so much better at burning completely all of the hydrocarbon fuel that we put in our tanks with the catalytic converters, that none of this oxygenated fuel is necessary any longer to control carbon monoxide. So we fixed that one. We fixed lead by taking lead out of the gasoline. We've come a long way towards keeping ozone under the line with our, again,
I
technology.
shaved my head and quit using my aerosol hairspray, so
Oh,
I
okay.
remember that from my childhood, so.
All right, I'll tell. Yeah, I know the guy. I'll tell him. Yeah, yeah. Well, let me just make one more point, and then I guess I'll throw it open to any more questions you might have. I mentioned before we have this window of opportunity to show that we could cross the health standard, the line. There are some consequences I thought I would make you aware of. If we, again, I said that the serious area SIP will build on the moderate SIP, and concerning the degree of emission control that we're required to compel everybody to use as we build these plans. In the moderate SIP was at a benchmark called what is reasonably available control measures and technologies. The big change probably in the serious reclassification and ensuing SIP will be that benchmark will rise a bit and become what is called best available control measures, technologies, whatever. And basically the difference is it costs more, okay? Now, if we are unsuccessful in reaching the health standard by 2019 and instead require an extension of our attainment date to fall somewhere within the window of 2019 to 2024, that benchmark would again rise from the best available controls to what are called the most stringent measures, okay? And what that is basically, it compels us to look at anything that any other state has done in its implementation plan or even just implemented in practice successfully. So again, the dollars per ton reduced goes up. So this is important for us. And I think it's important for everybody to know that we don't take that lightly. This is other people's money, and we're mindful that, it's hard to come by. So doing our due diligence will require that as we review all of these controls that people might be obligated to implement, we will give it a very thorough and careful vetting as we document, whether or not it may be feasible to implement in our non-attainment areas. And we've been given a pretty aggressive schedule by which to get this done. It's supposed to be done by the end of this year. And I'd point out that if the schedule were to slip by a bit, that would be why. We would be more interested in doing a very thorough and complete job the first time around and not having to turn in some half-baked plan, if you will, and go through the motions of all that.
And this is some information in the interest of time that you could get back to me on. But I would be curious in a lot of research on clean air and different things I've done since coming into office. I found it surprising that the state of Washington is actually moving away from emissions testings in their vehicles. I thought that was, when I think of Washington State, I think of a very aggressive, appetite for environmental practices, to put it nicely. And I thought that was an interesting pattern. I would be personally curious as to what practices they're instituting that are helping their air be clean enough to move towards that kind of stuff. And again, you don't have to answer that here if you don't know, but that was just a question that I had come across and was intriguing to me that I would love to know more about.
Yeah, probably off the cuff, I'd say two things. One, you'd have to look at the particular circumstance, and I know they have a lot of wood smoke that could drive their non-attainment rather than tailpipe emissions.
Yeah. and that's-
For us, it's the other way around. The other thing I would point out is an I&M test really is essentially the compliance element of any federal motor vehicle standard that we have in place. In other words, the feds set the cut points that the manufacturers of the cars have to meet, but then as, you know, we drive the cars, the performance of those technologies kind of degrades over time. And so the I&M program is sort of a periodic way to ensure that the vehicle is still meeting that standard that was set. As technology races ahead, we've now got kind of an onboard computer in everybody's car that we've all paid for. And the check engine light is sort of that verification that, in fact, all of these technologies are functioning as they were intended. So
And I appreciate that.
Washington has that in place as well, and so do we. So-
And that's, I think part of the reason I find it intriguing is because I forget the exact number, but it was a significant cost savings to the taxpayer. And so I'm going, if we're saving some money here and we're moving into this, you know, best available controls, which are going to
Right,
be a little more
right.
expensive, are there areas that we can say, hey, we're doing really good, so we can offset and shift some of that financial strain as we try and implement some of these better or best practices,
yeah.
so that the hit on the pocketbook of the people is a little bit less. And I think that's, you know, it's just, how do we get clean air, which we all want, and find that right balance on impact? And I thought that was just intriguing to me, if that's why that happened, and if there's areas where we can try and save people a little money, given an understanding, in all likelihood, we're probably gonna cost them some more money in another area.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it's not lost on us. We are kind of compelled to hang on to the controls we have. If we try to discard them, EPA calls it backsliding. They don't like
Right,
that.
and that's, we don't want that, but I just.
Right,
it's
but as the older
interesting.
cars, you know, as the sector of older cars diminishes and they're replaced by these newer cars with the onboard technology, we recognize that the IM program becomes less and less and less effective. It's true.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Right,
sure.
thank you, Bill. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making the trip down. I assumed you probably came down. Unless you were-
On bikes and front runner.
Yeah. Kathy. Okay, Kathy's here from Rocky Mountain Power, and she's going to talk a little bit about the performance plan as she's getting that ready. I've had the opportunity to go
Where's my
through
power button on?
go through their plant out there in, it's Linden, is it? Is it actually in Linden? Linden, okay, so it's in Linden. You'll see it off the freeway at times over there, and it's a wonderful plant. They do a great job.
I got it on.
100% sure I know how to work a power button.
You have to push and hold it. Push and hold it.
Sweet.
I can always turn around and look at the big screen.
Will this let my public works director know that it's not working, so we can come fix it later?
Yeah, mine's on.
Yeah, yours was on.
It was on.
Mine doesn't work
Now I
either.
can see.
Mine doesn't work either.
Mine's on.
No, it didn't come on.
Is it something as simple as perhaps kicking the power cord?
Well,
As if that's come loose, that's what's
No.
bothering you.
the light's on.
Light went off, yeah.
Great. Well, just a moment, because there'll be nothing to display until we get set up anyway.
So we can always look at the big screen. Oh, my plug thing is not powered. Yeah. It's plugged in. light come on yet? There we go.
Your light stays on. Yep. Mine turns on and then turns off, Richard.
We're ready for you whenever you are.
Trying to get mine plugged in here, so.
We don't need it anymore. We're supposed to be plug and play ready. That's the system we have,
We'll let them.
but we'll tell them.
Yeah, so my light just comes on and then it goes off. Monitor? On right now, but it has.
That's because there's no input. Oh, it goes into sleep.
It's sleeping.
Yeah, it's orange. It goes from blue to orange, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so light.
It's a light. It just, when it's sleeping, it's orange, and when it's
Yeah,
on, it's blue.
it's very faint.
One of those colors.
That's one of those colors that. Is Rob coming back in? Oh, there he is. Monitor behind's on. It was on. You turned off the screen behind now. There it is. One more change. That's it. You did.
I have it on a thumb drive. Would that be better?
You might just need to speak. Sorry.
Okay.
We thought we paid a lot of money for a plug and play easy system.
That's okay.
Okay, it's just learning how to operate the plug-and-play system. A learning curve.
The TV's on, but it said no signal.
There we
There
go.
we go. Our screens are on.
Your screens are on?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so we can start.
Is that one on? So it's only the front one. You're good.
We're good?
Renee
Go ahead-
just gotta
go ahead
figure
and
out the front
start.
one.
Okay. Okay. I'm Kathy Hoffman.
We're rewarding the back row. No, it's okay. Let's go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, our audio recording.
You have to turn the audio off? You have to turn it off to do?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
You're on
I'm
all the time.
Kathy Hoffman. I'm the Regional Business Manager for Rocky Mountain Power. I work out of our American Fork office. And as Chairman Lee mentioned, we met a few weeks ago to talk about the Customer Performance Plan. And at that meeting, he asked if I would just come and make a presentation about Rocky Mountain Power and kind of an overview of what we're doing in the county. So first of all, I did hand him this community performance plan for him to review and to talk to you commissioners about to determine how we will work this next year together. And we do this with most of our communities and with our large customers to see what we can do to, create a stronger relationship, as well as to make sure that we're meeting your specific needs. We do want to be a premier company, that you think of us as a premier company to do business with. So just a quick overview of Rocky Mountain Power. We are in 3 states. We're in Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming. But today we're going to specifically just talk about what we're doing in Utah County. So some of the facts is that there are 96,584 customers served in Utah County, which means that we have delivered 2,149,974,149 kilowatts to those customers in the year of 2016. And this report is all about what we've done in the last year. And so we also have community funding that we do give out. It's not a big pot, but we do try to do some things in the communities to help them with some of the events that they feel are particularly important.
I don't see the Utah County Fair on here.
Well, let's put it on. And how this works is that the communities will send me a request for funding, and they will send in, it's kind of a formal process because we need to know what it's about, how it affects the communities, how many people will it reach. And then we go through a review process, and at the first of the year, we will start to divvy out those funds. And so the first step is really to get that request in. So you can see we've participated in several things last year. The Highland City Fling, Cedar Hills Family Festival, Santa Coin, American Fork received money for their Still Days, Eagle Mountain City Pony Express Days, Vineyard Town Oktoberfest, Friends of Wasatch Mental Health, Children's Craniofacial Association, Mapleton City's July 24th celebration, Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce, Utah Valley University, Saratoga Springs Arts Council, where they do the Messiah during the holiday season, that performance, the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, and then the Sarah. So I wish our pot was a lot bigger so we can do more, but we feel like we are trying to spread those funds around so that the communities can enjoy some of their activities to the fullest. We also have a foundation that gives out grants, and the foundation is on a quarterly basis. There are four areas that we focus on, and the first one is the education organizations, and those grant applications are due by March 15th. We do have civic, community, and organizations not covered in the other categories, that those applications are due June 15th, and then the cultural and arts organizations September 15th, Health, welfare, and social organizations, December 15th. So on a quarterly basis, we're getting applications in from those different areas and taking a look at those that we can fund. And last year, for Utah County, we sent $53,755 out to organizations, so they benefited from those. And if anyone wants to put in an application, all they need to do is go to our website, and all the information is right there, the application and everything, and help to get those applications in. Now, we do have our Blue Sky Renewable Energy Program, and I think you're all aware of this. This has been going on for quite some time, but this is where people have the opportunity to buy renewable energy in 100 kilowatt hour blocks. They cost a little bit more, but these are for people who really want to do something for the environment, and they're willing to pay just a little extra to do so. And last year, for this for Utah County, we had 53 customers apply for this. We had 2 industrial customers, 53 commercial customers, 2 industrial customers, 2,616 residential, for a grand total of 2,671 people who our Blue Sky Energy Program participants. And with that, you can see that the annual kilowatt hours for this was 6,146,400. And so you can see that we've got a lot of participation in Utah County. But the next thing I want to talk about is the new program that we put in last year, and it's called the Subscriber Solar Program. And there are a lot of people who would like to choose solar power, but they do not want to put solar panels on their roofs. Or they can't afford it. So we came up with this new program where we have a 20 megawatt facility that's now online in Holden, Utah, and people were able to buy into this or subscribe to this program. And this program sold out quickly. It was really exciting. And but for Utah County, we have a grand total of 290 subscribers. And the annual kilowatt hours for that will be 3,561,600. So we're really excited about that, and we will be doing another one because this has been so popular. The Utah Solar Incentive Program, although we are no longer accepting applications for this one is over. Last year, we had out of Utah County 123 projects, and the incentives that went out were $2,118,764. So that was pretty exciting too. But you've probably heard a lot about our Watt Smart Energy Efficiency Program, and all of our energy efficiency programs are under that Watt Smart umbrella. And in the 2016 energy savings in Utah County through this program was a total of 6,206,343 kilowatt hours saved. And so the incentives that went out, that were paid out to these folks, was $593,036. So that's been a very popular program as well, and people are really have caught on to the whole idea of being energy efficient. It's better for us and our environment, and it's good for their bottom line. So, and again, back to our website for any information about that. And it's www.rockymountainpower.net. And you get to spell out Rocky Mountain Power. So I just want to make sure you understood that. One other quick project that we did last year and is underway is we started a Small Business Direct program. And this is where we have gone into the small businesses to help them be energy efficient. And we've offered incentive packages, and we've also offered to do audits with their small companies. And so last year, during the holiday season, I think it was, we went into American Fork and asked companies, small businesses, if they would like us to help them with that. And we have people all over the state that are taking advantage of this, but we are going into communities one at a time with this project. And again, it pays off for them and their bottom line for those who want to participate. And when we go into a community like American Fork, I always make a call to the mayor just to let them know that this is what we're doing in his city, and to make sure that in case he gets any phone calls, he knows that it's legit. So. Just a quick note about our new mobile app, in case you haven't installed it on your phones. We do have one that gives people lots of good information about the company. They can pay their bills, they can report a power outage, they can find out about what's happening, but it helps them stay close and to what's happening out there. And it's just more of our customer outreach programs. So with all of that, it just comes right back to our community performance plan. And so I'm hoping to get with you commissioners to get a performance plan decided on and signed, and so that we can continue working the rest of the year, this year.
A question for you on your community outreach.
Mm-hmm.
With power outage and everything, do you coordinate with the county at all on that in the way of informational purposes?
Yes.
When those things happen, you call somebody.
But we'll
I don't know
have,
who that would be for sure, but
and
your Whitner or
I'll
somebody
have
in
to
there.
find out who your county
Dispatch.
person is. But we do have emergency numbers, and I'll review that with you after, because I we take turns as regional business managers to go on what we call outage duty for a week at a time, and we're on 24/7. And our phones will ring at any time. If there's a major outage somewhere, and especially our larger communities, major customers are out, and we will give them a call. Usually they know when the power is out. So they have my number, every mayor, every city manager, large business folks or energy managers all have my number here in the county to call if there's an issue. But if I find out that something's happening, it goes off on my phone, I will call them and make sure everything's okay, to tell them what's happening, what time we estimate the restoring power to be, any issues that they might have, and we keep in constant contact. If there's anything major incidents is happening, then we will put into action our incident group to make sure that things are getting taken care of.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
All right,
Other
Thank you.
than we'll
Thanks for
want that
coming.
application for our fair.
Okay, send it in.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That's all when it comes to work sessions, sessions?
I have a request of the commission, and just for the nature of number 6 that we tabled, because our live stream actually does not record again, they leave after our work sessions. I wonder, because of the important nature, if we'd consider, now that we have a contract, reopening that for discussion. We still may need to go to closed, I understand that, but for the discussion, because it looks like the contract's done.
Contract is done. I'd like to read it. I mean,
I read it during the particular matter presentation, so.
I don't know if we need to keep a live stream on there while I'm reading down through it. Could you come back? Yeah. Okay. Could you come back we just give you a call, or you can wait out in the hall during our closed sessions? And then, we'll determine maybe after that when,
Or maybe we take a 5-minute recess for read and do it all as one part.
and we could, I don't know, what do you prefer? What do you?
Either
I'd
one.
like to talk with Robert about it, and as we get down through it too, and it's not necessarily just a
Okay.
skim and read. I'd like to at least
Okay.
have some conversation.
I would be fine if we moved into the closed to discuss this, pop back out, finish that, and then we could go back into closed for our other portions to expedite it as quickly as possible.
Okay.
That way we're not got these guys hanging around all day.
Yeah, just because of the time crunch, we need to have regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna get done today. I don't see-
Procedurally, Dave, does that work if we just move into a closed for contract review, and then we could pop back out, address the item, and then move back in for our personnel and other issues?
Still should probably have our public comment though.
Yeah, we'll have public comment on it just after we do the review and close.
So is there any general public comment?
We're looking at you, Robert. Come on up.
I'll be quick. My name is Robert Stevens. I live in Provo, Utah. So Commissioner Lee and I, this winter semester at BYU, had the opportunity to oversee a group of students whose task it was to look into what we can do with the unused lands in the county. One thing that was kind of startling that they discovered was that the generation now wants to abandon farming. I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure Nathan Ivy knows of some exceptions. The people who didn't live on the farms are more likely to abandon farming. The people who saw their fathers suffer are more likely to abandon farming.
Because they can just get their food from the store.
Yeah. We also learned that on the majority of the food, of course, as we probably knew, was being imported into the county. Even when there are crops which are grown in the county, it's more likely that they are being exported out of the county. So So we know that as much as we enjoy all the greenery around us, it's kind of unsustainable unless things will be able to change. So in knowing of my struggles for the last 14 years and trying to move onto my own land, I thought about this and I looked up the definition of liberty. So this is just a comment, and I'd like to read it, just again. The definition of liberty, according to Google, is the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. Now, the word that had caught me there was the word oppressive. So I looked that up. And oppressive is a prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control, the state of being subject to unjust treatment or control. Prolonged is the word that I think that we could focus on as a county and make some improvements. In engineering, we all know that if we divide a task and we all go our own separate ways into our own departments, it's going to bring efficiency down to a nightmare, down to a crawl. And what we do then is we say, you know what, everybody working on the same project should all go work in the same room for a period of time until we solve this as rapidly as possible. So the opposite of prolonged, you could say, is something that is rapid or quick. If we want to get our farmers on their farms and growing and figuring out new innovative ways that they can produce and satisfy the public, who no longer really has an appetite, by the way, for homegrown things. Since the years of regulations, of restrictions on the farmers to thwart the competition of, so no new ones really are able to form. Now, instead of having ma and pa stores, we have huge chains who are multinational who can cheaply import their produce from anywhere. If we're interested in reversing this, I think we have to focus on what we can do to get people to be able to live on their lands as fast as possible. What can we do to cut through all the burdens and regulations to let a farmer become a farmer? And that's really all I have to say about this, except for one thing that I'd like to discuss is that in the process of trying to become a farmer, I personally have had to sell, or by the time I finished on my 103 acres, I'll have sold almost half my land just so I can make all the utility improvements at a cost of over a couple $1 million so I can have a farmable land on the last half of it. So, I mean, it's out of the reach of most people to be able to build dedicated roads, to be able to grab a raw piece of ground and establish a farm, especially if they can't move onto it immediately as our forebears did. One of the most shocking things is that there are so many things you have to ask the government for authorization and permission. And every time you receive authorization, you say, okay, now I'll increase my risk and take the next step. Recently, the health department has said, those approvals that we gave you in 2009 for your depth of your water and your perk test, no longer valid anymore. Be able to, at will, just say, hey, those things are no longer applicable or valid anymore, undermines the entire process because, in developing land, the very first thing you do is you go out and buy water rights. And water rights are owned by the public. They're not your water rights. And the state has the authorization to go yank them away from you at any time if they see that the use is better for other people. But you have an expiration date, and you got to show beneficial use of your water shares or your water rights. So to have the health department say, very early on in the process, you went and did all this stuff, and we gave you authorization, but now years later, since you know, had to wait on all these different things, we're going to invalidate that, and it could take you another year now. And we've changed our policies and our rules, and we're more restrictive. It just sets everything, you know, to a state of uncertainty where those water rights now are near expiration, and it's very unlikely that we can withstand another year of this. Our forebears just moved on to their lands, and they became productive, and they worked by the sweat of their brow, and then they established government to go protect liberty. So that's all I have to say. If there's anything you can do to just go and get together all the people who are involved in certain activities and say, how can we do the opposite of prolonging oppression and speeding up the things we want from the county to happen, then I just encourage you to do that. I hope that makes sense. Any questions?
I feel like we're going through a process, and I know we had a discussion on process and what that's like. I mean, to build a house or a business, you have to go through a process. You just can't get the occupancy permit before you start the process.
Yeah.
And so there is a process that we have to go through, and you know, it's important for us to go through the process with everybody the same as much as possible, so that it's consistent and that we're equal under the law. And we've had those discussions back and forth, and
We have. And with the contractors, you know, if you don't like a contractor, you can get another one. If the service is being done by a department in government, there is not anyone else you can go to or competition. And if they're slow, there's no redress. You know, last meeting I submitted.
we do have appeals, and I mean, there are.
Other appeals? Well,
Yeah,
I'd like to know
there's-
about them.
There's generally
Well,
appeal
But
processes.
there's
that
also,
we go
I mean,
through.
I'm not disagreeing with the principle of what you're saying, but there comes a point, and I grew up building homes, okay? So I get a foundation, I build it, and it gets approved.
Right.
I suspend construction for 8 years. You're right, I'm gonna be subject to the current laws. I mean, there comes a point where government, for the safety and protection of all those involved, don't you agree that they'd have to invalidate it because there are new standards? Again, the science is improving all the time. I mean, I grew up building when our floor joists were 2x12s or 2x10s. We nailed them together and we hung them all and spanned it as much as we could, right? Now they have TJIs, man. You go knock them out. I can wire my house so much quicker. And so, again, I don't disagree with the concept of what you're saying, but there comes a time when you say the speed of government, but if government comes out and performs its function and the speed of our landowners take 8 or 9 years to progress, that's not the speed and inefficiency of government. That's just at the rate at which, by right, you have to move. And government, you're right, we get held to certain standards that change for us that don't make us happy, and we fight too from the county perspective. But we're subject to EPA regulations and state laws and that infuriate us at times. But we still have to, unfortunately, play by those rules and try and change those rules when they're bad. But, you know.
Standards provide some goodness, a lot of goodness, but they also are oppressive because they focus on what may happen in an obscure situation. Like I pointed out, in a meeting previous, years ago, 25 years ago, the government tried to impose standards on the software industry. It was a massive failure. It slowed down progress massively. When the free market was able to go take over and decide what kind of languages and technologies we want to use, it just blossomed. We have a huge number of choices now, and so I'd rather see the government involved, if they must be involved at all, in recommendations. No homeowner wants to live in their own sewage. If the sewage builds up on your property for some reason because there's a wet year, then you go out and you fix it. It's very unlikely you're going to live with any kind of
The problem is these days,
problems.
that's not what people do. They then sue the government, they come back, and they say, well, then you're gonna help me because I pay my monthly $13, and you're right. But, I don't disagree, but at heart, that same principle is for government to supply that sewage treatment, then everybody still has to play by the exact same rules. That's the only fair way, because government can't, and we all say as Republicans, we don't want Republicans, our government to pick winners and losers. So the only way to do that is to be equal. Now, again, where that level of equality is, I'm with you, there's some debate there, but there has to be a standard, and they should be reviewed. Maybe lessened in some cases, maybe strengthened in others, I don't know. Depends on what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, you get the great debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the balance has to be in the middle somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we want to be informed as a public. We also would like to make our own decisions.
Sure.
You know, when the pioneers arrived here, you would get your own piece of property, move on to it immediately, and then you'd work in cooperation with your neighbors to hook up irrigation. Today, we have other things. We have utilities, and if your neighbors don't want to cooperate, then there's going to be problems. In my own industry, our standards are evolving every day, and government and industry are all contributing to the standards. And we read the standards online, and we try things out, and if they don't work, then we go somewhere else. But I think to have a government institution dictate what the standards are, that's just not free market. That's not the American way. I mean, that's how communism works, right? I was telling to Commissioner Lee the other day, I said, look, what's the difference between obtaining approval to live on your property in a communist nation versus the county? You still have to ask permission, all the way down, you know, and, you go, and so forth. And the only difference I can see is in America or in the county here, you actually own your property at the end, whereas in a communist nation, the state owns the property, but you still have to ask permission, and wait on government entities. Luckily, in communism, you know, you can go and pay off your state officials, and then you can speed up the process. Here, I don't see any way of doing that.
But there is a big difference.
Okay, what else, Bill? I mean,
The big difference is that you have the right to come and change things too, and talk about it and facilitate within that, like we do. We looked at our policies and procedures when it came to procurement. We looked at it and said, you know what, we think there needs to be a change on this from the past. And that comes from us being elected as representatives. And so in communism, you don't get any of that. You
that's true.
salute and you say how high and you jump, and that's it, it's all over.
That's true.
And, you know, and there's another point that I want to bring out, because, and we've talked about this over and over, but
You know.
we keep going back to when individuals first came here and they said, go 15 miles and start your, you know, and then here's your spots, and,
Right.
you know, Brigham Young or whoever that group was that was kind of assigning that during that time right then. And we followed those rules, and just saying, go ahead and do it. But today, those that are the same ones, if you want to say the leader of the LDS Church, Thomas Monson, he follows the procedures that are outlined. I mean, we in our next meeting at 1 o'clock, there's going to be some church property that they've gone through procedure with, which is pretty consistent. So yesteryear is way different than today. You know, the individual Thomas said Sponson, he conducts and says, let's go through the procedures. And I think we have to work into that as well.
I agree.
Robert, quick question for you.
Yeah.
So if your neighbor moves in and installs an unauthorized septic system that fails, contaminates your water source,
Yeah.
poisons you and your family, potentially results in the death of one of your children, wouldn't it be reasonable to think that government should have some general policy to try and protect the life of the individual citizens within a community from that type of a tragedy? After all, as we look constitutionally, our role in governments to protect life, liberty, and property. And so I think when we come to specific instances, we have to assess, is government's action in this particular entity protecting life to a reasonable standard? And maybe that reasonable standard is being exceeded or under-exceeded. But I think that that's an important part of this discussion. When we look at property rights, they're like any particular right. You can't exercise a right if it causes unjust harm or endangerment to another individual. And that's government's role, is to try and facilitate and ensure that we are allowing people the opportunity to exercise their rights, but that exercising isn't being done in a manner that directly, knowingly can potentially cause significant danger or even death in some instances to another entity. And obviously we have to take it on a case-by-case basis and try and find out where the right balance point is there. But I think that's an important component of this discussion.
You know, I totally agree, and I think if we just had that as our premise for all decisions, will what I do infringe on my neighbor or destroy their inalienable rights or harm them in any way, then I think that we could probably throw away most of the regulations if we acted upon that. So I think that's an excellent observation and insight and should be repeated frequently. But, on the other end, if it takes 14 years in order to go move onto your own property, and, in the meantime, your children have grown up and got to the point where it's like, Dad, why are you still wasting your time on this? Then I think that the government regulations have become too oppressive. We've tried too hard to go protect the public. As a stunt, I think if I ever run against one of you, I'm gonna go and staple all the 300 of the pages of county regulations for land use, and just walk up the stage.
When did we cut it down to 300 pages?
Yeah, well, 292 pages, and then the health department has their own, which I still haven't been able to go see that list yet, but,
It's far more than 300 pages, I assure you.
for land use ordinances now?
Well, probably not just for land use ordinance.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's way more if you add everything else up, yeah. So anyway, like you said, there has to be that balance. Your role is to protect inalienable rights, including life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and property. And that's what we want you to do. But on the other hand, maybe a good rule of thumb is the 80-20 rule. If 80% of the people are gonna be satisfied, then let's not focus on the 20. But I think a lot of these regulations, what's happening is it's looking at some remote possibility and let's go and regulate against that. I've been breathing the air all these years. I'm still alive here in the county, even though all the PM10 particles, have exceeded regulations and so forth. I've drank the water all these years. I don't know anyone who's died of arsenic yet in the county. You want us to live on 5-acre or more lots for our wastewater treatment systems, but there are places nearby where they allow half that. I grew up on a house that had 1/3 acre, and we had a wastewater treatment system in our backyard. Everybody had a 1/3 acre. I don't think anyone ever got sick because of it. So I think we spent a lot of time looking at obscure, not very likely to happen situations, and we provide regulations to protect the public against that. And then we do it in our own little departments and divisions rather than unite together and say, let's just get something done with the best decision we can do right now with the best recommendations based upon what we can determine from technology and science, and let's get this person protected and have him go live his life, and then he can change it
So
later.
we have a saying as a referee, all rule changes every year come from good lawsuits, okay?
Yeah.
The reality is all these regulations came from a lawsuit. So you say they're obscure. I guarantee you that our attorneys would give us case after case after case, and not generally one, when all these come. Therein lies the real problem in America today. That's the problem
I
is,
agree.
when you say 80-20, the problem is that 20% thinks that the county has deep pockets and then they should come sue us for $100 million because we said that the road needed to be 56 feet because by darn, the fire engine that's gonna come save their house, heaven forbid if it ever starts on fire, needs a turning radius in order to get around, or the snowplows to clear their roads so that they can not be on slick roads. But then everybody comes and complains and says, well, why 56 feet, not 54 feet? Well, again, because as technology's changed, you're right. We used to have 1-lane dirt roads, and I've traveled up in the high Uintas, and you hope that when you're heading up there in your truck and trailer that nobody else is coming down because somebody's going off the edge, right? So you're right. Some industries, some things do change, but some of us contend that some of those are good things. Again, not
Are
that
good
they
things,
shouldn't be
yeah.
for review, but
And times change.
sure.
Yeah, and times change. They are good things.
The Pioneers,
Yeah.
for example, that you
Yeah.
keep quoting, I'm pretty sure they didn't have refrigerators to keep
They
that
didn't.
buffalo meat or any of that. And I'm pretty happy the fact I can go buy meat by the pound and, those are some changes I'm happy with.
Well, we-
But I do
we-
buy local.
We thank you coming in. I
Well,
mean,
thank you,
go
sir. I
ahead and
think I have
have
your
a
time.
final word on it, and then we'll see if we can move on.
A final word? Okay, I'll have a final word. I've had 3 5.25 acre lots now sit for 8 months with all the improvements done, but because of government bureaucracy and, and regulations, I can't get approval. I think 99.9% of the citizens who would stand on my asphalt driveway stubs and see my laser leveling and my cement irrigation ditches and know that there's power and cable and natural gas, and dirt boundaries and everything, and my clean well, and so forth, would say, why isn't this buildable? But it's because of over bureaucratic regulations that those lots just sit empty. I'm ready to go build a flagpole in each one of those. I'm not sure what to put up, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, or here's why this is not approved, because it's pretty shocking. I don't have the ability to go with the media to be furious. I don't have the ability to go arouse the public, to provide a remedy. Every week I go down there and I just go look at those lots and say, these lots should be approved right now. I'm waiting on the health department, I'm waiting on public works, I'm in fear now of losing all of my past acceptances from the health department and having to start over again. So, I think we can do
Well,
a little better.
We'll keep working on it.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think I'm done here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Any other public comment?
Yes, Commissioner. My name is Carl Holland, Deputy County Attorney. I just wanted to inform Mr. Stevens, I'm not intimately aware of all of the situations that he's been speaking about, but I was sending some text messages with some people in the health department. One of his lots did receive some approvals yesterday. I'm unsure what those approvals are or if those are the ones he's speaking of. But that approval letter was mailed out yesterday. I'm sure if he'd like a copy before it reaches him by mail, he can go and ask the health department. The other point that I would just like to point out is that Utah County Health Department Regulation 1701, which is available on the County Health Department website, does allow for an appeals process for anybody who disagrees with the decision made by health department employee, denied approvals or whatnot. And so if he would like to look into that, that is the regulation that he should probably use to do so.
Okay, will you just make sure and touch base with him afterwards and that he gets
Thank
all
you.
that information? Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, we will close we will go into our closed meetings. Thank you.
You guys want to hang out for like probably 5-10 minutes? Because we'll do the one, then come back.
And we'll come back.